My mother actually said my wedding was an embarrassment, out loud, in front of everyone. I was still holding my bouquet when the room went quiet. Someone behind me whispered my name like I had just done something wrong, but I hadn't even spoken. Then a hotel staff member walked up and placed a sealed legal envelope in my hands. My name was printed on it, not handwritten typed. Marcus leaned in and said, calm as ever, I invited someone you need to hear from. Need to hear from... On my wedding day, I broke the seal. The first page had a signature I recognized instantly, but it wasn't my mother's. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about a wedding. If you're watching from somewhere outside the US, tell me where you're from. I always find it grounding to know who's listening. And if it's late where you are, what time is it right now? You can subscribe too, only if you want to hear how this unfolded. 2 months before the wedding, my mother stood in the middle of my living room, turning slowly like she was inspecting a property she might invest in or reject. "This is what you're working with," Diane Clark asked, glancing from my dining table to the stack of linen samples I had laid out. "Eleanor, sweetheart, this feels... small. I had spent 3 weeks negotiating with vendors, balancing my work schedule, and carefully tracking every dollar in a spreadsheet. Not because I had to, but because I wanted control. I had been a wedding planner for 8 years. I knew exactly how to make something elegant without wasting money. "It's intentional," I said. "We're keeping it intimate. About 70 guests. My mother let out a soft laugh. 70 people is what you invite to a rehearsal dinner, not a wedding. Marcus shifted beside me on the couch but didn't interrupt. He had learned quickly that stepping in too early with my mother only made things worse. "I'm paying for it myself," I added, keeping my tone even. "So I'm designing it the way I want." That was the wrong sentence. Diane stopped moving. She turned to me with that expression I knew too well. Controlled disappointment, the kind that made you feel like you'd already failed before you had a chance to explain. "That's exactly the problem," she said. "You're thinking like an individual, not like family." There it was. I crossed my arms. "I don't understand what that has to do with my wedding." "It has everything to do with it," she replied, walking closer. "Ethan is still trying to stabilize his business. Your father's investments aren't what they used to be. And you're sitting on savings you don't even need right now." Marcus glanced at me this time. Not alarmed, just connecting dots. "I do need it," I said. "I've been building that savings account for years," for what she pressed. "One day. One event." "Eleanor, that's not how responsible people think." I felt something tighten in my chest, not because of what she said, but because of how familiar it sounded. When I was 23, fresh out of college, my mom had offered to help manage my first real paycheck. She said she could allocate it better, make sure I stayed ahead. At the time, it felt like support. Now, standing in my own apartment at 32, it felt like something else. "I'm not asking you for money," I said carefully, "so I don't see why my wedding budget is part of a family discussion." Ethan finally spoke, leaning against the kitchen counter. "Because everything is connected, Elle. You're acting like what you do doesn't affect anyone else." I turned to him. "How exactly does my wedding affect you?" He hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough. "Mom's just saying priorities matter," he said. "And right now the family needs stability." There was that word again. Stability. Diane softened her voice. "We're not trying to control you," she said. "We're trying to guide you. There's a difference." Marcus let out a quiet breath beside me. Guidance usually doesn't involve telling someone how to spend their own money. Diane smiled at him, polite, tight, dismissive. You're still new to this family, Marcus. You don't understand the history. He didn't respond, but I could feel the shift in him. After they left, the apartment felt heavier than before, like the walls had absorbed everything that had just been said. Marcus stood in the kitchen looking down at his phone. What I asked. He didn't answer immediately. He walked over, sat across from me, and turned the screen so I could see. It was a bank notification, a transfer. Not recent, but not old enough to ignore. The amount wasn't huge, just under $5,000, but the name attached to the authorization, it made my stomach drop. Diane Clark. This is from your account, Marcus said quietly. From about a year ago. I stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. That's not possible, I said. She doesn't have access anymore. Are you sure? He asked. I opened my banking app, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts. I scrolled through past transactions, months, then years. At first, everything looked normal. Then patterns started to appear. Small withdrawals, inconsistent. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for them. But now I was, and I couldn't stop seeing them. I need to check everything, I said, already standing up. Marcus nodded. Then let's do it properly. Not just the app. He meant the bank. Full records. I grabbed my keys, my chest tight not from panic, but from something colder. Clarity. Because for the first time I wasn't asking whether my mother had crossed a line. I was asking how long it had been happening. The bank didn't feel like a place where your life could quietly unravel. It was bright, neutral, calm in a way that suggested everything inside it was structured, controlled, safe. I sat across from a woman named Karen Whitfield, a senior account specialist with the kind of steady voice that made complicated things sound manageable. Let's start simple, she said, pulling up my profile. You're requesting a full transaction history and account access review, correct? Yes, I said. Going back as far as possible. She nodded once, then typed. Marcus sat beside me, not touching me, not interrupting, just present. It grounded me more than anything else in that moment. Karen turned the monitor slightly so I could see. This is your primary checking account, she explained. And this? She paused. Clicking again. Is a secondary linked account. I frowned. I didn't open a second account. You did, she said gently. Or rather, it was opened under your name about 9 years ago. 9 years. I tried to place myself back then. I had just started my first job, overwhelmed, trying to prove I could handle everything on my own. Or maybe not on my own. There's an authorized user listed, Karen continued. I already knew who it was before she said it. Diane Clark. The name sat there on the screen, clinical and undeniable. When was the last time this authorization was updated? Marcus asked. Karen scrolled. It hasn't been formally revoked. That means access technically remained active. I thought it was closed, I said. Or transferred. Something. Karen gave a careful nod. That's a common assumption. But unless the authorization is explicitly removed, it continues. Continues. Even when you stop thinking about it. Even when you believe you've moved on. Can you show me the transactions? I asked. Karen clicked into the account. At first it looked harmless. A few small transfers, a couple $100 here, maybe $1,000 there, spread out across years. Not frequent enough to trigger alarms, not large enough to feel urgent, but consistent. That was the part that made my chest tighten. She wasn't taking everything I said quietly. Just enough. Karen didn't respond. She didn't need to. Can you filter the last 12 months, Marcus asked. The screen refreshed. That's when it changed. The amounts got bigger. 3,000, 4,500, 6,000. Then one transaction just 6 weeks ago. $18,750. My breath caught. That one, I said, pointing. Where did it go? Karen opened the details. The recipient wasn't an individual. It was a firm. Harrison and Cole Financial Legal Services. I've never worked with them, I said. Marcus leaned closer. Is there a contact attached? Karen clicked again. There's an authorizing note. Signed electronically. She paused, then turned the screen slightly more toward me. Signature Diane Clark. I felt something settle into place. Not panic, not even anger. Recognition. She used my account to pay a lawyer, I said. For what, Marcus asked. Karen scrolled further. There are a few other payments to the same firm, smaller amounts leading up to this one. A pattern. Building toward something. Can you pull any associated documents, I asked? Karen hesitated just slightly. We can request them, but financial institutions don't always store the full legal correspondence. However, she clicked into another tab. There is a reference number tied to this payment. She wrote it down on a small card and slid it across the desk. If you contact the firm directly, this should allow them to locate the file. I picked up the card, staring at the numbers like they might rearrange themselves into something less real. Marcus spoke carefully. What about stopping further access? Karen nodded. We can revoke authorization immediately, and I would strongly recommend freezing this secondary account until everything is clarified. Do it, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. All of it. She worked quickly. A few confirmations, a digital signature, a final screen. It's done, she said. Diane Clark no longer has access to any account under your name. That should have felt like relief. But it didn't, because cutting off access didn't explain what had already happened, or why. As we stood to leave, Karen added, if there's a legal dispute involved, you may want to consult with an attorney of your own. Marcus gave a small nod. We will. Outside, the air felt different, sharper. I looked down at the card in my hand again. Harrison and Cole, a firm I had never heard of. Paid with my money, authorized by my mother. For something she didn't want you to see, Marcus said quietly. I didn't answer right away, because there was one detail I hadn't mentioned yet. Something Karen had almost skipped over. At the bottom of the transaction page under internal notes, there had been a single line. Not a full sentence. Not even a proper description. Just a reference. Client matter asset transfer preparation. I closed my hand around the card. She's not just taking money, I said slowly. She's moving something. Marcus looked at me. What kind of asset? I met his eyes, the pieces finally aligning into something I couldn't ignore anymore. I don't know yet, I said, but whatever it is, she needed a lawyer to do it. I didn't call the law firm right away. That might sound strange considering everything we had just uncovered, but I needed to understand what I was walking into before I let anyone else define it for me. So instead, I called someone Marcus had mentioned before, Richard Patel. He wasn't flashy. No billboards, no late-night ads promising justice in 30 seconds. He was the kind of attorney people were referred to quietly when things were complicated enough that you didn't want attention. His office was in a low-rise building in Pasadena, No marble floors, no dramatic reception area. Just a clean space, soft lighting, and a receptionist who didn't ask unnecessary questions. We sat across from him about an hour later. I placed the bank printouts on his desk along with the card Karen had given me. "I need to know what this means," I said. "Legally, not hypothetically." Patel didn't rush. He read everything carefully, flipping through pages, occasionally making a small note on a legal pad. Marcus stayed quiet. He knew this part wasn't about reacting, it was about understanding. After a few minutes, Patel leaned back slightly. "Let me start with the simplest piece," he said. "Your mother had legal authority to act on your behalf at some point." "I was 23, I said. "I signed something back then. She said it would help with taxes and planning." He nodded. "That would be a limited power of attorney. Depending on how it was written, it could allow her to access accounts, move funds, even engage financial professionals in your name." I felt my jaw tighten. Even years later, "Yes," he said calmly. "If it wasn't formally revoked." Marcus glanced at me. "You thought it expired?" "I thought it was handled," I said. Patel tapped one of the pages. "From what I can see, she didn't act recklessly. She acted deliberately." That distinction landed harder than anything else. "Meaning?" I asked. "She kept the transactions small for years," he said, "below thresholds that would trigger alerts or require secondary verification. Then recently the amounts increased. Because she needed more," Marcus said. Patel nodded once. "Or because whatever she's preparing requires a larger sum." I slid the card from Harrison and Cole toward him. "She used my money to pay them. I've never worked with that firm." He picked it up, glanced at it, then set it back down. "I have," he said. I blinked. "You have?" "They specialize in asset structuring and transfer." Patel explained. "Trusts, property shifts, shielding ownership, things that require careful documentation." A cold realization started forming. Could she be moving something in my name? I asked. "It's possible," he said, "but not necessarily without your involvement." "She has my involvement," I said. "That's the problem." Patel held my gaze. "Not anymore." Silence stretched for a moment. Then Marcus asked, "What about the payments?" Using her authority to pay a lawyer, does that cross a line? Patel considered that. "It depends on intent. If she can argue the actions were for your benefit, it becomes more complicated. If they were for her own benefit, that's where it shifts. So we need to prove that," I said. "Yes," he replied. "And that requires more than transaction records. It requires context." I exhaled slowly. "What kind of context documents?" he said. "Correspondence. Agreements. Anything that shows what that firm was hired to do and for whom." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "We have a reference number." Patel gave a small nod. "That helps." He stood, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a folder. Not mine, but something he used as a reference. He flipped it open briefly, then closed it again. "There's something else you should know," he said, returning to his seat. "What I asked." He rested his hands on the desk. "You're not the first person to walk in here with a situation like this, but you are one of the few who caught it before the transfer was finalized." My chest tightened. Finalized. If assets are moved into certain structures, trusts, shell ownerships, it becomes significantly harder to unwind, he said. "Not impossible, just slower and more expensive." I thought about the note at the bottom of the transaction. "Asset transfer preparation." "How close is she?" I asked. Patel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for the card again and tapped it lightly against the desk. "That depends on what Harrison and Cole have already drafted," he said. and whether your signature is required or has already been simulated through prior authorization." A silence settled over the room. Not heavy, sharp. Marcus spoke first. "Can she actually move something major without Eleanor knowing?" Patel met his eyes. "With the right paperwork in place, she can initiate it. Initiate. Not complete." There was still a gap. Still time. I straightened in my chair. What's the first step? Patel didn't hesitate this time. "We request everything he said, formally, in writing, using that reference number." "And if they refuse," I asked. "They won't," he said, "because once they know you're aware, they become accountable." I nodded slowly, feeling something shift inside me. Not fear, direction. Patel pulled a blank sheet toward him and began drafting. As he wrote, he said almost casually, "There's one more detail." I looked up. "What is it?" He didn't stop writing. "Harrison and Cole don't usually take on clients without a referring advisor," he said. My stomach dropped slightly, meaning, he glanced up just for a second. "Someone pointed your mother to them," he said. Marcus frowned. Who Patel slid the paper across the desk for my signature. That he said quietly is the question that tends to change everything. I stared at the page, then at the card, because suddenly this wasn't just about what my mother had done. It was about who had helped her do it. My mother set the table like nothing was wrong. That was the first thing I noticed when we walked into her house that Sunday evening. Everything was arranged with the same precision she had always valued: linen napkins folded into perfect triangles, wine glasses aligned at identical angles, candles already lit even though the sun hadn't set. Control, presentation, always. Eleanor Diane said, smiling as if our last conversation hadn't happened. "You're right on time," Marcus greeted her politely. I followed, placing the bottle of wine I'd brought on the counter. Ethan was already there, leaning back in his chair, scrolling through his phone like he had nowhere else to be. We sat. Dinner was served. For the first 15 minutes, it was almost normal. Almost. Then my mother reached for a folder sitting beside her plate. "I want to go over something before the wedding," she said, sliding it toward me. Just a formality. I didn't open it right away. "What kind of formality?" I asked. "Financial alignment," she replied smoothly. "Nothing complicated." Marcus's posture shifted beside me. Subtle, but I felt it. I opened the folder. Inside was a neatly printed agreement. Clean professional formatting. Legal language, but simplified like it was meant to feel harmless. I scanned the first page, then the second. Then I slowed down. "This gives you oversight on my accounts," I said. "Temporary oversight," Diane corrected. "Until things stabilize." What things? I asked, looking up. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she leaned back slightly, folding her hands. "Eleanor, you're about to enter a new phase of your life. Marriage changes financial structures. It's responsible to have continuity." "That's not what this says," I replied. "This allows you to approve transfers. It allows you to redirect funds. It allows me to help," she said. Ethan finally looked up. "You're overthinking it, Elle." I turned to him. "Am I?" He shrugged. "Mom's been managing things for years. It's worked so far." That word again. Managing. Not supporting. Not advising. Managing. I closed the folder gently. "I'm not signing this," I said. Silence. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't loud. But it landed. Diane's smile didn't disappear. It just thinned. "You didn't even consider it," she said. "I did," I replied. "That's why I'm saying no." Her eyes held mine, measuring. "Is this about the bank?" she asked. There it was. I didn't react outwardly, but something inside me sharpened. "What about the bank?" I asked. Ethan shifted in his seat. Just slightly, Diane exhaled as if disappointed in my performance. "You've always had a tendency to jump to conclusions," she said. "It's one of the reasons I stepped in when you were younger." "You stepped in," I repeated, "to prevent mistakes," she said, "to protect you." Marcus spoke calm but firm. "Taking money without clear consent isn't protection." Diane turned to him with that same polite dismissal. "You're interpreting things without context." "Then give us context," he said. She didn't. Instead, she leaned forward, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel more intimate and more controlled. "Eleanor," she said, "your brother is in a fragile position right now." I glanced at Ethan. He didn't look at me. "He had an opportunity," Diane continued. "A business expansion that required immediate capital. I made a decision to support him. With my money," I said. "With family resources," she corrected. "It wasn't yours to give," I replied. "It was mine to manage," she said. There was no anger in her tone, no defensiveness, just certainty, and that was somehow worse. Ethan finally spoke quieter now. "I was going to pay it back. When I asked." He hesitated. Diane stepped in before he could answer. "That's not the point. It is the point I said. Because no one told me. No one asked me. You just decided. For the greater good," she said. I let that sit for a second. Then I said, "You also used my money to hire a law firm. That landed differently." Ethan looked up again. Diane didn't move, but something in her eyes shifted. Not panic. Not quite. Adjustment. "I don't know what you're referring to," she said. I held her gaze. Harrison and Cole. Silence. Not long, but long enough. Ethan frowned. "What is that?" Diane's voice came out steady. "It's a financial services firm." "I know what it is," I said. "I want to know why you paid them with my account." She leaned back again, reclaiming distance. "Because it was necessary," she said, "for what Marcus asked." Diane looked at him, then back at me. "For stability," she said. That word again. But now it sounded different. Not reassuring. Strategic. I pushed the folder back toward her. "I'm not signing anything," I said, "and whatever you're doing with that firm, you need to stop." Diane didn't reach for the folder. Instead, she studied me, quietly. "You think you're in control here?" she said. "I am," I replied. For the first time that night, her expression changed. Not anger, not disappointment. Something closer to warning. "Family doesn't work that way," she said. I stood up. "No," I said. "It doesn't." Marcus stood with me. Ethan stayed seated, staring at the table like it might offer him a version of this where he didn't have to choose sides. At the door, my mother spoke again. Not loudly, just enough. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. I turned back. "Then make it simple," I replied. "Stop using my name." Her eyes held mine, and for a moment I thought she might argue. Instead, she said something else. Something quieter. Something that didn't fit the pattern she had followed all evening. "Be careful, Eleanor," she said. "You don't understand everything that's already in motion." I didn't answer. because for the first time I believed her. Outside, the air felt colder than it should have. Marcus unlocked the car, then paused. "That wasn't just about Ethan," he said. "No," I replied. I pulled the card from Harrison and Cole out of my bag, again running my thumb over the edge. "She's already moved something I said." Marcus looked at me. "Or she's about to." I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. She said it herself. In motion, which meant whatever she started, it hadn't stopped. A week before the wedding, my apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. Every surface was covered: seating charts, vendor contracts, fabric swatches, timelines broken down to 15-minute increments. It should have been familiar territory. I had built entire careers around organizing other people's weddings, but this one felt exposed. Not because of the event itself, because of everything underneath it. Marcus stood at the kitchen counter, scrolling through his laptop, reading something for the third time. "You're going to wear a hole through that trackpad," I said, not looking up from my notes. "I'm trying to decide how much of this we bring into your wedding," he replied. I finally looked at him. "We don't bring any of it in. That was the plan. That was before your mom said something is already in motion," he said. I exhaled slowly. "If we turn the wedding into a confrontation, we lose control." Marcus closed the laptop halfway. "And if we don't?" I didn't answer immediately, because the truth was, I didn't know. He turned the screen toward me. An email thread. Richard Harris. Subject line, redocumentation review. I walked over, scanning the message. Harris had responded to Marcus late the night before. Short, direct. Confirmed prior involvement with Diane Clark. Identified irregular asset movement patterns. Willing to appear in person if necessary. Possesses supporting documentation. My eyes stopped on the last line. Available next Saturday, the day of my wedding. "You already told him when it is," I said. Marcus nodded. I needed to know if he'd even consider it. "And he will." He didn't hesitate. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made everything feel more real. "What exactly does he have?" I asked. Marcus shook his head slightly. He didn't send specifics over email. Said it wasn't appropriate. "Smart," I said. "Careful," Marcus corrected. I leaned against the counter, folding my arms. If he shows up and presents something in front of everyone... I paused. "There's no taking that back." Marcus met my eyes. "Neither is what your mom's doing." Silence stretched between us. Not tense, just heavy with consequence. I walked back to the table, picking up the printed timeline for the wedding. Ceremony at 4, cocktail hour at 5, reception at 6. Everything planned down to the minute. Everything predictable. Except this. "What if we're wrong?" I asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer right away. "What if there's context we're missing?" I continued. "Something that explains why she did this." He stepped closer. "Then we hear it. But we don't ignore the evidence to protect the possibility of a better explanation." That landed. Because that's exactly what I had done for years. I sat down, staring at the timeline without really seeing it. "I don't want my wedding to be about this," I said. Marcus pulled out the chair across from me and sat. "It won't be," he said. "It'll be about you deciding where the line is." I looked up at him. "And if that line is in the middle of the reception," I asked. "Then that's where it is," he said. I let out a small breath. Not relief. Not quite. Acceptance. There was a soft vibration on the table. My phone. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello? A pause. Then my mother's voice. Eleanor. I didn't speak. I think we need to reset, Diane said. Her tone was calm, almost gentle. This tension isn't good for anyone. For anyone, I repeated. I'm asking you to trust me, she continued. Just until after the wedding. There it was. Delay. Trust you with what I asked. With things you don't fully understand yet, she said. I closed my eyes for a second. I understand enough, I replied. No, she said quietly. You understand pieces. I glanced at Marcus. He was watching me, not reacting, just listening. Then explained the rest I said. Silence. Longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted. Not softer, more deliberate. If you push this now, she said, you're going to complicate something that was meant to protect you. Protect. The same word she had used before. I didn't ask to be protected, I said. No, she agreed. You didn't. Another pause. Then, but you benefited from it. That stopped me. What does that mean? I asked. You'll see, she said. If you don't interfere. I felt my grip tighten around the phone. That's not how this works anymore, I said. I'm not asking for permission, she replied. She was stating a position, not negotiating. Then what are you asking? I said. Her answer came without hesitation. I'm asking you not to embarrass yourself, she said. The words landed cold, familiar, controlled, and suddenly I could see the shape of it. Not just control over money, control over narrative, over how things looked, over who appeared right. I'll take that risk, I said. Another silence. Then quietly, You've always been stubborn, she said. And you've always counted on that, I replied. This time she didn't respond. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. Marcus didn't ask what she said. He didn't need to. She's not backing off, he said. No, I replied. I looked at the email on his laptop again. Richard Harris. Available next Saturday. I picked up my pen and drew a small mark on the printed timeline. Not in the ceremony. Not during dinner. After the speeches. A moment where people were already paying attention. Then we don't chase her, I said. Marcus watched me. We let her walk into it, I continued. His expression shifted slightly. Understanding. Are you sure? He asked. I nodded, because for the first time this didn't feel like reacting. It felt like choosing. If she thinks I don't understand what's in motion, I said, then she's not watching closely enough. Marcus closed the laptop completely. Then I'll confirm with Harris, he said. I looked back at the timeline one more time. Everything's still in place. Everything's still mine. Except now there was something else woven into it. Not chaos, not revenge. Exposure. And once it started, there wouldn't be a quiet way to end it. The morning of my wedding was quiet in a way I hadn't expected. Not peaceful, just contained. Like everything had already been decided somewhere I couldn't see yet. The suite overlooked the ocean's soft gray light coming in through the windows. My dress hung by the balcony door, pressed and perfect, exactly the way I had imagined it months ago before any of this started to surface. My bridesmaid Tessa moved around the room with careful energy, checking details, asking small questions I answered without thinking. Do you want the veil on before or after photos? She asked. After I said automatically. She nodded and kept moving. Normal. Everything looked normal. My phone buzzed once on the vanity. A message from Marcus. "Everything's set. He's here." I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. I typed back, "Okay." Then I turned the screen face down. Tessa caught my expression. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said, and it wasn't a lie. Not exactly, because whatever was about to happen, it wasn't uncertain anymore. It was just waiting. A soft knock came at the door. Tessa opened it without checking. My mother walked in. Diane Clark looked flawless. Navy silk dress, minimal jewelry makeup done with the same precision she applied to everything else in her life. She didn't look at the room first. She looked at me. "Well," she said, "at least you didn't choose something completely inappropriate." I let that sit. Tessa shifted uncomfortably. "I'll go check on the photographer," she said, slipping out of the room. The door clicked shut. Now it was just the two of us. "You could have said nothing I said." Diane tilted her head slightly. "And let people assume I approved of all this. All this." I repeated. She gestured lightly toward the dress, the room, the scattered details of a day I had built piece by piece. "You've always had potential," she said, "but you lack perspective." I watched her carefully. Perspective on what I asked. "On how things look," she said. "On how they reflect on the family." There it was again. Not what something was, how it appeared. "I didn't design this for you," I said. "No," she agreed. "You designed it for yourself." That's the problem. A quiet settled between us. Not empty, just defined. "You don't have to stay," I said finally. "No one is forcing you to be here." Diane smiled faintly. "Of course I'm staying. This is still my daughter's wedding." Something in her tone made that sentence feel less like affection and more like ownership. A knock interrupted us. This one sharper. 5 minutes, someone called from outside. I stepped toward the mirror, adjusting a small detail at my waist that didn't actually need adjusting. Diane moved closer, standing just behind me. For a moment, we looked like what we were supposed to be. A mother and daughter on a wedding day. Then she spoke again. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "About the wedding I asked." Her reflection met mine. "No," she said. "About everything else." I turned to face her. "This isn't going away," I said. "It doesn't have to happen today," she replied. "It already is," I said. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You think you have control because you found fragments," she said. "But you don't see the full structure." "Then show me," I said. "I tried," she replied. "You refused." I shook my head. "You offered control, not clarity." That landed. She didn't deny it. Instead, she stepped back slightly, reclaiming distance. "Just remember, she said once something is exposed publicly, it doesn't go back into place." I held her gaze. "I'm not trying to put it back," I said. Another knock. "Eleanor, we need you." I didn't move right away. Neither did she. Then Diane gave a small nod, like she had reached a conclusion I wasn't part of. "Then I hope you're ready," she said, "for what I asked." She turned toward the door. "For what you're about to confirm," she said. The door opened before I could respond. Tessa stepped back in, smiling too brightly. "It's time," she said. Everything shifted then, not dramatically, just forward. The ceremony passed in a blur of light and sound. Music, faces, vows I meant with a clarity that cut through everything else. Marcus's hands were steady when he held mine. His eyes didn't waver. That mattered, more than anything else in that moment. But even as we walked back down the aisle, even as people stood and clapped, even as the space filled with movement and voices, I could feel it, waiting. The reception began exactly on schedule. Cocktail hour flowed into dinner, dinner into speeches. Everything I had planned unfolded exactly the way it was supposed to, which meant there was only one part left. Marcus stood up when it was his turn. The room quieted. He thanked people first. His family, mine, friends who had traveled, normal. Then his tone shifted. Slightly. Not enough for anyone to panic. Just enough for me to recognize it. "There's one more person I want to acknowledge tonight," he said. My mother's posture straightened. I didn't look at her. I didn't look at anyone. I watched Marcus. Because this was the moment we had chosen. Carefully, deliberately. And there was no version of this where it stayed private anymore. Marcus glanced toward the back of the room. "Someone who's been part of this story longer than most of you realize," he said. A pause. Then Richard Harris. I felt the shift ripple through the room before I even turned. Chairs creaked. Voices lowered, attention redirected. A man stood near the back. Mid-60s, gray hair, measured expression. He didn't rush. He walked forward like he had done this before, like he understood exactly how much space his presence was about to take. My mother didn't move, but I could feel her attention lock onto him. Marcus stepped aside, giving him the floor. And just before Harris spoke, before a single document changed hands, my mother said one word. Not loudly, but clearly enough that I heard it. "No." I didn't turn to her, because whatever she thought she could stop it was already happening. Richard Harris didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. By the time he reached the center of the room, the entire reception had gone still in that subtle, uneasy way people do when they realize something unscripted is about to happen. "Thank you, Marcus," he said, nodding once. Then he looked at me. "Eleanor." Just my name. No title. No explanation. But there was recognition in it. Familiarity. Not personal, but professional. Like he had been watching this unfold from a distance for longer than I had known. He turned slightly, addressing the room without fully engaging it. "I'll keep this brief," he said. "This isn't the place for a full review, but it is the place for clarity." My mother stepped forward then. Not aggressively, just enough to enter his line of sight. "This is inappropriate," Diane said. "Calm. Controlled. Whatever you think you're doing, this is not the setting." Harris didn't react to her tone. "I agree," he said. "It isn't the ideal setting. But neither is a wedding funded in part by assets the bride didn't know she was losing." That landed. Not explosively, but decisively. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone near the back whispered something I couldn't make out. I didn't move. Diane's expression didn't change, but something in her posture tightened. "You're making assumptions," she said. "No," Harris replied. "I'm referencing documentation." He opened a slim leather folder he had been carrying. No theatrics, no stack of papers spilling out, just a few pages. Over the past 9 years, he continued a secondary account under Eleanor Clark's name has been accessed through an active power of attorney. A pause. Authorized user Diane Clark. Now people were looking, not at me, at her. Ethan shifted in his seat, his hand gripping the edge of the table. "This is a private matter," Diane said, "and it's being presented without context." Harris nodded slightly. "Context is important." He lifted the first page. "Which is why the transaction patterns matter," he said. Small withdrawals over time. Consistent. Below reporting thresholds, escalating in the last 12 months. He didn't read every number. He didn't need to. The pattern was the point. My mother's voice stayed even. That account was managed responsibly. Harris looked at her then. Not confrontational, just steady, responsibly for whom he asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she shifted direction. This was done to support family, she said. My son needed help. Ethan flinched slightly. Harris inclined his head, and some of the funds were used for that purpose. He didn't argue it. He didn't dismiss it. He placed it exactly where it belonged. However, he added a significant portion was directed elsewhere. He lifted the second page. Payments made to Harrison and Cole Financial Legal Services. Now the name was in the room, not just between me and Marcus, not just in a bank office or a lawyer's desk. Public. Real. Diane's eyes flickered just briefly. Then she recovered. That firm was engaged for asset protection, she said, which ultimately benefits Eleanor. There it was, the justification. Harris didn't challenge it directly. Instead, he asked, "Under whose instruction silence?" "Not long, but long enough," he continued before she could respond. "The engagement file includes correspondence," he said, "requests for structuring asset transfers, preparing ownership adjustments, and most notably drafting documents intended to reassign control of specific holdings." My pulse slowed. Not faster, slower. Like my body had decided panic wasn't useful anymore. What holdings someone in the room asked quietly. Harris didn't look at them. He looked at me. "Eleanor," he said, "were you aware of any pending asset transfers under your name?" "No," I said. My voice didn't shake. He nodded once. "Then I'll be specific." He turned the page. "A residential property," he said. "Purchased 6 years ago. Title held under a trust associated with your early financial planning." I felt the words before I fully processed them. Residential property, 6 years ago. I swallowed. "I don't own a house." Harris met my eyes. "You do," he said. The room shifted again, this time louder. Not chaos, but confusion. What Ethan said under his breath. Diane didn't look at him. She was looking at Harris, still controlled, still composed. "Continue," she said. "It wasn't permission. It was a challenge." Harris obliged. "The property was acquired using a combination of Eleanor's funds and structured financing," he explained. "Managed under the same advisory framework your mother oversaw at the time." My mind moved backward. 6 years ago. I had just stabilized my business. I had been saving aggressively, trusting the structure my mother had helped set up years earlier. "You never informed her," Marcus asked, his voice low but clear. Diane didn't respond. Harris did. "There is no record of direct disclosure," he said. I felt something shift again. Not shock. Alignment. Pieces finding each other. The recent payments to Harrison and Cole Harris continued were connected to a pending restructuring of that asset. My fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the table. Restructuring how I asked. He didn't look away. "Transferring controlling interest," he said, "into a new entity." I knew the next question before I asked it. "Whose entity?" He paused. Just enough to make it clear the answer mattered. "Diane Clark's." The room didn't explode. It didn't need to, because the silence that followed was heavier than any reaction. My mother finally moved. Not stepping back, stepping forward. "You're presenting this like theft," she said. "It isn't." Harris didn't argue. "Then explain it," he said. And for the first time that evening, for the first time since this had all begun, my mother didn't answer immediately. She looked at me. Not at the room, not at Harris, at me, as if deciding what version of the truth I was allowed to hear. "You were never supposed to find out like this," she said. I held her gaze. "Find out what I asked." Another pause. Then, that everything I did, she said slowly, was already tied to something you benefited from. The words hung there, incomplete, carefully framed. Not quite an admission, not quite a denial. Harris didn't interrupt. Marcus didn't speak. Even Ethan stayed silent. Because whatever she was about to say next, it wasn't just going to explain the money. It was going to redefine everything attached to it, and I could feel it, right at the edge, waiting. No one spoke. Not because they didn't have questions, but because my mother had just shifted the ground beneath all of them. That everything I did was tied to something you benefited from. It sounded like justification. It felt like a warning. I stood there still holding the edge of the table, my pulse steady in a way that surprised me. "Then say it clearly," I said. "No framing, no positioning, just facts." Diane looked at me for a long moment. Then she exhaled. Not dramatically, just enough to signal a decision. "6 years ago," she began, "your finances were not as stable as you remember." I didn't interrupt. "You had momentum," she continued, "but not security. Your business was still volatile. Your savings were growing but not protected." "I was doing fine," I said. "You were exposed," she corrected. "One downturn, one lawsuit, one bad season, and everything you built could have collapsed." Harris didn't move. Marcus stayed beside me, quiet, attentive. Diane continued. "I had just come out of a financial collapse of my own," she said. "One you never fully saw." That part, I believed. She had always kept things contained, clean, presentable, but there had been a period years ago when something shifted. Fewer events, tighter conversations, subtle changes in how money was discussed. "You didn't tell me," I said. "No," she agreed, "because telling you wouldn't have protected you." Her voice stayed even, controlled. "I learned what happens when assets are visible when they're tied directly to your name," she said. "They become vulnerable. To creditors, to partners, to people who see opportunity where you see stability." She paused, letting that settle. "So I made a decision," she said. "I used the authority you gave me to restructure part of your financial base." I felt my jaw tighten. Without telling me, I said, "Yes," she replied. No apology. Just confirmation. Harris finally spoke. "You acquired a residential property in her name," he said. "Held under a trust structure." Diane nodded slightly. "Yes." "For protection," she added. Marcus looked at her. "Protection doesn't require secrecy." "Sometimes it does," she said. I shook my head slowly. "Not from the person you're protecting." She didn't respond to that. Instead, she continued her version. "The property appreciated," she said. "Significantly. It became a stable asset, something that could anchor everything else." I absorbed that. A house, 6 years. Appreciation. "Why not transfer it to me when things stabilized?" I asked. Another pause. this one shorter. Because things didn't stabilize, she said. Ethan shifted again more visibly now. What does that mean? I asked. Diane's eyes flicked toward him just briefly, then back to me. Your brother made decisions, she said. Business decisions that required support. Ethan looked down. I used available resources, she continued, including funds I managed under your name, and the house I asked. Her expression tightened just slightly. It remained protected, she said. Until recently, Harris added. Diane didn't look at him, but she didn't deny it either. The restructuring, Harris said calmly, would have transferred controlling interest of that property into an entity solely managed by you. This time Diane did respond. It would have kept it secure, she said. For you, Marcus said. For the family, she corrected. I felt something settle inside me then, not anger, not even betrayal. Understanding, clear, sharp, unavoidable. You didn't trust me to manage my own life, I said. That's not what this is about, she replied. It is, I said, because every decision you made removed me from it. She held my gaze. You were benefiting, she said. Without consent, I replied. Silence again. But this time it wasn't uncertain. It was defined. Ethan finally spoke, his voice lower than before. I didn't know about the house, he said. No one reacted immediately, because that mattered, but it didn't change what had already been done. I thought Mom was just moving things around, he added. Diane didn't correct him, which said enough. I looked at her. All of this, I said, gesturing lightly not just to the documents, but to the room, the moment, the weight of it. You built it without me. You justified it without me. And you were going to finish it without me. Her voice stayed steady. I was going to secure it, she said. For yourself, I replied. For all of us, she insisted. I shook my head. No, I said. For control. That word finally landed. Not deflected, not reframed. Just there. Diane didn't argue it. She didn't accept it either. She simply stood there, composed, contained exactly as she had been all evening. But something had shifted. Not in her. In the room. Because now everyone understood the same thing. Not the emotions, the structure, the choices, the intent. I looked at Harris. What happens next? I asked. He answered without hesitation. You have full legal standing to revoke all prior authorizations, he said, challenge any pending transfers, and reclaim direct control of any asset held in your name or derived from your funds. Clear, actionable, real. I turned back to my mother. This ends now, I said. She didn't react immediately. Then quietly, you don't have to do this publicly, she said. There it was again. Image, narrative, control. I met her gaze. You already made it public, I said. You just didn't expect it to be visible. Another silence. Short. Final. Eleanor, she said, once you do this, there's no going back. I nodded. I know, I said. And I did, because this wasn't just about money anymore, or a house, or a legal structure. It was about something much simpler. Who got to decide what my life looked like? And for the first time, that answer was mine. The room didn't erupt after that. There were no dramatic exits, no raised voices echoing through the ballroom. Just a quiet collective shift, as if everyone present had reached the same conclusion at the same time. I set my bouquet down on the table. Not carefully, not carelessly, just intentionally. "This is what's going to happen," I said. My voice carried further than I expected. "Not loud, just steady. I'm revoking every authorization connected to my name, effective immediately." I glanced at Harris. He gave a small nod. "I'll be filing a formal request first thing Monday," I continued. "Any pending transfers tied to that property or any other asset connected to my accounts are frozen." No one interrupted, even my mother. "I'll be working with independent counsel to review everything that's been done under my name," I added, "and anything that can be reversed will be." I let that sit, not as a threat, as a boundary. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "Elle, we can figure this out without—" "No," I said, not harshly, but clearly. "We could have figured it out before. That option's gone." He sat back, not arguing, not agreeing, just absorbing. I turned to my mother. Diane stood exactly where she had been, her posture still composed, her expression controlled. But there was something different now. Not defeat. Absence. Like she had stepped back internally, removing herself from the outcome. "You built something I didn't consent to," I said. "And you expected me to accept it because it looked stable from the outside." She didn't deny it. "I'm not undoing everything out of anger," I continued. "I'm undoing it because it was never mine in the first place, not in any way that mattered." Her eyes met mine. For a moment, I thought she might argue again. Reframe it. Redirect it. Find another angle. But she didn't. Instead, she said quietly, "You're choosing uncertainty over structure." I nodded. "Yes," I said. "Because it's my uncertainty." That was the closest thing to an answer she was going to get. Harris stepped forward just slightly, not to interrupt, but to anchor the next part. "I'll coordinate with your attorney," he said. "Make sure all documentation is transferred appropriately." "Thank you," I replied. Marcus finally moved closer, his hand brushing lightly against mine, not taking over, not guiding. "Just there. I'm not going to ask you to stay," I said to my mother. It wasn't a dismissal. It was a release. She considered that. Then she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "I'll handle what needs to be handled on my end," she said. No apology, no explanation beyond what had already been given, just a statement. Then she turned. Ethan hesitated for half a second before following her. His expression conflicted in a way that didn't resolve itself. And just like that, they were gone. The doors closed behind them with a soft, final sound. The room stayed quiet for a few seconds longer. Then slowly people began to move again. Not back to what it had been, but forward. Different. Real. Marcus looked at me. "Are you okay?" I thought about that. About everything that had just shifted. The house I didn't know I owned. The money I didn't know I'd lost. The structure I didn't choose. "I am," I said. And for the first time that day, it wasn't complicated, because nothing had been magically fixed, nothing had been handed back. There were still legal steps, documents, conversations that wouldn't be easy, but the control had changed. Not because someone gave it to me, because I took it back. Marcus exhaled softly. "Then we should probably finish what we started." I looked around the room, at the tables I had designed, the people who had stayed, the version of the day that was still intact even after everything that had just been exposed. "Yeah," I said. "We should." The music hadn't stopped. It had just waited. Marcus held out his hand. This time I took it without hesitation. Not because it fixed anything, but because it didn't pretend to. And that was enough. We stepped back into the center of the room, not as a performance, not as a reset, just as ourselves, clear, defined, unmanaged, and for the first time in a long time, fully visible. There's something people don't say out loud when they talk about family and money. It's not just about what's taken, it's about what's decided for you without your voice. For a long time, I confused protection with control and stability with silence. They can look the same from the outside. Setting boundaries doesn't always feel like strength in the moment. Sometimes it feels like loss, like you're choosing distance over connection. But there's a difference between holding on to people and giving them access to your life without limits. If you've ever had someone manage your choices for your own good, you probably understand how hard it is to question that, especially when it comes from family. But clarity matters. Consent matters. And control over your own life isn't something you earn by waiting. Forgiveness, if it comes, doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. It just means you stop carrying the weight differently. If this story felt familiar in any way, I'd really like to hear your perspective. And if you want to follow more stories like this, you can subscribe only if it feels right to you. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.